First story, I cut ties with my entitled father after he abandoned me when my mom died. Now my delusional fiancée contacted him and staged a reconciliation to please her savior complex syndrome, and is now begging for a second chance after I broke up with her and called off our wedding. I 27 minutes lost my mother when I was 8 years old. That was the worst day of my life, but at the time I didn't realize I was actually losing both of my parents. My father, 55 million, didn't die, but he may as well have. After the funeral, he dropped me off at my grandparents' house saying he just needed time. I was too young to understand what that meant, but my grandparents assured me that he would come back for me, that he just needed to grieve and figure things out. I believed them for weeks. I kept waiting for him to walk through the door and take me home. I thought maybe he was just lost in his sadness, and that eventually he'd realize I still needed him. My grandparents kept telling me to be patient, but as the months passed and then years even, they stopped bringing him up. The truth was, he wasn't coming back. Not as a father, not in any way that mattered. I never got birthday calls, no visits on holidays, not a single moment where he checked in just to see how I was doing. The only times I ever heard from him, or when he needed something, he came around when his life was falling apart, when he was struggling with money, relationships, or some bad decision he had made. He'd talk endlessly about his own problems, dump everything on me, and then disappear as soon as he got whatever he wanted, whether that was a loon, a place to crash, or just a temporary escape. I learned quickly that I wasn't a son to him. I was just another person he could use. So I stopped caring, I stopped hoping, and I stopped thinking of him as my father at all now. At 27, I have my own life. I live with my fiancée, Sarah, 26F, and she has been my rock through everything. She's always been patient and understanding, especially when it comes to my past. She grew up with a loving, supportive family, and even though she knows mine wasn't the same, she's never judged me for the way I feel about it. At least that's what I thought. A few nights ago, I heard a knock at the door. It was late, and I wasn't expecting anyone. Sarah was in the kitchen making dinner, humming to herself, while the smell of garlic and butter filled the house. Everything felt warm, familiar, until I opened the door, and there he was, my father standing on my doorstep like nothing had ever happened. He looked different, older, obviously, but that same casual confidence was still there, like he had every right to be here. He greeted me like we were old friends, catching up, making some comment about how long it had been then before I could even react. He stepped inside, looking around like he was trying to take in my life. He congratulated me on the engagement, saying he'd heard about it, then made some offhanded joke about marriage, something about how he could help me navigate the headaches that come with it, like he had ever been around to give me advice. I didn't want to do this. I didn't want to entertain whatever nonsense he had come here with. This time I told him to leave. At first, he tried to brush it off, acting like I was overreacting. He started talking about how he knew he'd made mistakes, but wanted to make up for lost time, that he was finally in a good place and wanted to reconnect, but I had heard all of this before. Every single time he showed up, he had a different excuse, a different justification for why he hadn't been around, why he hadn't reached out, and it was always a lie. I wasn't interested in hearing in it again, so I pushed him towards the door and told him the truth. He was dead to me. I didn't want him in my life, and then I shut the door in his face. Sarah had seen everything. She didn't say anything right away. She just came over and wrapped her arms around me. She held me for a moment like she was trying to process what had just happened. Then she asked me what that was all about. I didn't want to get into it. I just told her not to bring up my father again, that as far as I was concerned, he didn't exist. That's when everything between us shifted. She pulled back and looked at me like I had just said something cruel. She asked me what I meant, and when I repeated it, she got upset. She told me that my father was right there alive trying. I explained everything. I told her how he had abandoned me, how I had spent years believing he'd come back, and how every time he showed up, it was just to use me. I told her how he had never, not once, cared about my life, how he never even asked how I was doing. She listened, but it didn't seem to change her opinion. Instead, she told me that people can change that. Maybe he really did regret what happened and was finally trying to make things right, that maybe I was being too harsh, too unwilling to give him a chance. I tried to explain that this wasn't just a grudge, that this wasn't about being bitter or refusing to forgive. It was about years of, neglect. It was about the fact that he had made his choice a long time ago, and I had learned to live with it, but she didn't see it that way. She just shook her head and told me that I couldn't erase people just because they disappointed me. And then she grabbed her coat and left. She's been staying at her friend's house ever since she won't answer my calls or texts, and now I'm stuck here wondering if this is a deal breaker for her. I love her. I love our life together. But she doesn't understand what it was like growing up without a father. She doesn't understand what it's like to be treated like you don't matter, like you were never important to begin with. She comes from a family that's loving and supportive where forgiveness is easy, because no one has ever really hurt her like this before. She keeps saying he's trying now. But I've seen this pattern before. I know how this ends. I just don't know if I can make her understand that. And I don't know if she'll ever be able to accept how I feel at it. I honestly didn't expect this level of response when I posted, and I appreciate everyone who took the time to comment. I've read through everything. And while I don't agree with some of the harsher takes, I can see why people are questioning how my fiancé acted. But there's something I need to clear up. Sarah did not contact my father. A few people suggested that she had to have known about him beforehand, maybe even reached out to him behind my back. Some are saying she must have been the reason he showed up at my doorstep. I get why it might seem that way, but I know that's not true. Sarah didn't even know my father was alive. I never told her because in my mind he wasn't. Not literally, obviously, but I had already buried him in my heart a long time ago. He wasn't part of my life, and he never would be. As far as I was concerned, he was gone, and there was no reason to bring him up beyond the basic fact that he abandoned me. That was a mistake on my part. I should have told Sarah more about him, about what he had done and how I felt. But to say that she was secretly working with him behind my back, that's ridiculous. Sarah and I have never had that kind of relationship. We talk about everything. If she had found out my father was alive and wanted me to reconcile, she would have come to me first. She would have blindsided me like that. I think what happened is much simpler. He heard about my engagement through family or some old connection and decided it was a good excuse to worm his way back in. He always had a way of making things about himself, and my engagement probably seemed like the perfect opportunity for him to play the caring father who wanted to be part of my life again. As for Sarah's reaction, I think it came from a place of hurt, not malice. She was blindsided too. Not by my father showing up, but by how I handled it. She's always known that I have issues when it comes to my father, but she didn't realize how deep that wound actually went. From her perspective, she saw a man standing in front of me alive and trying to make amends, and I responded by shutting him down completely. That's not something she's used to in her world. When people make mistakes, they apologize and you talk things through. But my father's absence wasn't just a mistake. It wasn't a misunderstanding or a rough patch in a relationship. It was decades of abandonment. That's what she doesn't fully grasp yet. And yeah, I get why she was mad that I never told her the whole story. We have always had good communication, and from her point of view, I kept something huge from her in her mind. If I had been honest from the start, maybe she would have been prepared. Maybe she wouldn't have reacted the way she did. I still don't agree with how she handled it, walking out on me, ignoring my calls. But I also don't think this is some massive betrayal. She's upset, I'm upset, and we both need time to process this. But one thing is clear, she didn't set this up. I won't believe that, and I won't let anyone convince me otherwise. Update, well, Reddit, you were right. I didn't want to believe it. I told myself there was no way Sarah would ever do something like
this. I defended her, convinced that she had no part in my father's showing up. I was so sure that if she had known, she would have told me, but I was wrong. She knew. She had known for months. She had been in regular contact with him. She had even helped him financially. And the worst part, it wasn't even him trying to force his way back into my life. It was her. She had orchestrated the entire thing. The wedding is off, and now I'm left picking up the pieces of a relationship I thought was built on trust. After Sarah left that night, she ignored my calls. I figured she just needed space. Maybe she'd finally see my side of things after cooling off. Then a few days later, my father showed up at my workplace. I wasn't expecting it. I hadn't seen him since I kicked him out of my house. My first instinct was to tell him to get lost, but he wasn't there to argue. He actually looked disappointed, like he had expected things to turn out differently. And then he started talking. He said he thought things would have gone another way, that he really believed Sarah had done enough to get me to at least listen, that she had worked so hard to make this happen. That's when it hit me. Sarah hadn't just known about my father. She had been involved. I didn't ask him anything else. I didn't need to. I left work early, and went straight to where she was staying when she opened the door and saw me. She immediately tensed up. She must have seen something in my face because she tried to act normal. Asking if I was okay, I asked her how long she had been talking to my father. She denied it. She looked me right in the eye and lied, said she had no idea what I was talking about, that she had nothing to do with him showing up, that she was just as blindsided as I was. I let her talk. I let her dig herself into a deeper hole, and then I told her that I had spoken to my father. I told her everything he had said, about how hard she had tried to get me to reconcile, about how much effort she had put into making this happen, about how she thought she could fix me by bringing him back into my life. That's when she broke. She didn't even try to keep up the lie after that. She just started crying. She admitted that she had reached out to him first, that she had been the one to find him. She had started talking to him 3 months ago, thinking that if she could just get to know him, maybe she'd see a different side of him. And she did. Because of course he had been kind to her, respectful, polite. She saw a man who regretted his past, who spoke about his mistakes, who said he wanted to be better, and she believed him, so she decided she was going to help him help us. She sent him money when he told her he was struggling. She listened to him talk about how much he wanted to reconnect with me, and she made the decision that it was her job to make that happen. That's why she never told me. She knew I would say no. She knew I wouldn't want this, and instead of respecting that, she went behind my back and did it anyway. After she confessed, she kept saying she never meant to hurt me, that she was just trying to do what was best, that she thought I would see things differently once I actually spoke to him. She really thought that once I saw him standing there, ready to reconcile, I'd finally understand what she had been trying to do for me, but she never considered what I wanted. She took something deeply personal, something that had shaped my entire life, and decided that she knew best, that her version of my past was the truth. She didn't respect me enough to let me choose for myself, and the worst part, she only confessed because I caught her. If my father hadn't let something slip, if I hadn't pressed her, she would have never told me. That's why I called off the wedding when I told her. She completely broke down. She begged me to reconsider. She kept saying I was throwing everything away over one mistake, that she had only done this because she loved me. She said I was roue in our future over my own stubbornness. But love isn't manipulation. Love isn't forcing someone into a situation they don't want. Love isn't making decisions for someone else and then blaming them when it backfires. She's been calling and texting nonstop. Since then, I haven't responded. I don't think I ever will. I never wanted a relationship with my father. I had already made peace with that. But what did Sarah do? That's something I never expected. She made the conscious choice to go behind my back. She didn't respect my boundaries, my trauma, or my right to decide what was best for my own life. She convinced herself that I needed fixing, and she played God with my past. She saw my childhood trauma as a problem to solve, and in the end she did exactly what my father did all those years ago. She left me with nothing. Second story, entitled Mom Allowed Her Boyfriend to Abuse Me, Who Forced Me to Eat Dog Food from a Dog Bowl, and then she gave me up for foster care, choosing her boyfriend. Now 12 years later, her kids contacted me wanting to have a relationship, but it was to force me into reconciling with our mom, who then called me selfish for not giving her another chance. We have covered this story, but Op made 4 new updates. We didn't cover. I really need an outside perspective on whether I'd be the A in this situation. I'm a 21-year-old male. I ended up in foster care at 9 years old because of the abuse I suffered at the hands of my stepfather, a man my mom kept choosing over me, despite all the support and interventions that were supposed to protect me. My mom refused to kick him out. Even after she had a restraining order against him, she still let him back into our lives. Meanwhile, she went on to have 2 more children with this man, my half-brothers who are now 19, Richie, and 16, James. It got to the point where it was obvious that no matter what, she would keep letting him back into our lives and allowing me to be his scapegoat for anything that was wrong in life, and I ended up being removed. After I was removed from the home my mom was allowed to keep, and raise my brothers as if nothing had happened. From what I know, my stepdad never laid a hand on them. My mom and this man are still together. I know because I've checked her Facebook more times than I'd like to admit. Growing up, it was devastating to realize that my mom would rather give me up than fight for me. She could have kept me if she'd just left him, but she didn't. This abandonment left me with deep scars and a lot of issues to deal with as I grew up. It didn't help that she cut off all contact with me almost as soon as I was placed in foster care. She wouldn't even show up for court-ordered visits. Foster care was also really rough for me. I bounced around 3 different families, and it wasn't until the last one that I got any therapy to help me make sense of what had happened a few days ago, out of nowhere. I got a Facebook message from my Richie and James. They said they've been thinking about me a lot and want to get to know me. They even mentioned that our mom talks about me sometimes and wonders how I'm doing. They said he'd like to start some kind of relationship if I'm open to it, and Richie said he would be willing to drive him and James to come and visit me wherever I am in the country. They both seemed nice in this message, and I don't have an issue with either of them. At first I was going to ignore the message because I don't want anything to do with my biological family, but then a darker thought crossed my mind. This could be my one and only chance to expose my stepdad for the monster he truly is. I could finally tell my half-brother everything he did to me, everything he put me through, and let the truth come crashing down on them. I know that if I do this, it'll probably destroy any chance of having a relationship with them, but honestly, I'm not sure I want one anyway. I told my friend that I was thinking about doing this, and he said it's a really bad idea that won't accomplish anything I wanted to. He said it will most likely just cause them to think I'm bitter and mean, and won't make them have any issues with their dad. But well, I know it would be a difficult thing to process. I would want to know if my dad was like that. I would want to know the truth about how my dad treated other children. I don't know how much they know about why I was removed into care. So, what would I be the Arl if I went through with it? Relevant comments. Global Uncore, look, 2821. Not wrong. What happened to you is terrible. There's a good chance you'd be talking about what happened to you anyway, since they want to get to know you. But they are not to blame for what their dad and your mother put you through. So if they ask, then ask them if they really want to know the truth of what happened. If they say yes, there's your permission. No. 11159. If the sole reason you want to get in contact with them is to cause issues between them and their brother, then yes, maybe you are wrong, but if you want a relationship with them and the topic comes up, you equally shouldn't have to censor yourself or tell any lies about their father. We're a scientist not passing judgment, but your stepdad and their dad are different people. What do you gain by ruining their image of their dad? Would you be happy if they end up hating their dad and no longer have a relationship with him? Would it make you feel good to strip your brothers of their dad? Because honestly, I don't see a reason for you to poison the well, unless that's your in-game, and that would make you. I have a half-sister. Our dad was awful for me. He was horrifically abusive to my mom and abandoned us after never paying child support. He would love bomb and then disappear over and over if I was unhappy. It was always my fault. My half-sister grew up with a loving and attentive dad. They're super close, and she loves him dearly. She knows that our dad and I have a more difficult past, but I never try to damage her relationship with him. I'm happy. She has a dad that is good to her. What would I gain from hurting their relationship? I would hurt her, and he genuinely
is a different person as I'm significantly older than her, and he has matured in that time. I'm not saying that's the case with your stepdad, but I would never hurt my half-sister because of my childhood pain update. Hey everyone, I wanted to come back and give you all an update. First off, thanks for all the advice and different perspectives. I really needed to hear them. So after thinking a lot about what everyone said, and after having a session with my therapist, I realized that my initial plan to tell my brothers everything about my stepdad wasn't really about helping them. It was more about me still holding on to the anger and hurt from my past, and that's not fair to them. A lot of you pointed out that they probably don't know the full story and are innocent in all this, and honestly, that hit hard. I decided to reach out to my brother Richie and told him I'd like to meet up. I didn't mention anything about our mom or the stepdad situation. I figured if we were going to start a relationship, it's better to take things slow and not dump all that heavy stuff on them right away. We ended up meeting at a cafe. I was super nervous, But when I saw them, it actually felt nice. They were both really nice, and we just talked about normal stuff like what we've been up to, our favorite football teams, that sort of thing. It was weirdly easy to chat with them. At one point, James asked why I was placed in foster care. That caught me off guard, but I decided to keep it vague and just said that things were complicated at home back then and that going into care was what was best for me at the time. James started pushing a bit for more details, but Richie told him to knock it off, which honestly was a relief by the end of it. I was glad I went. They asked if we could stay in touch, and I said yes. I'm still figuring out how much to share about what happened, but for now I'm just trying to focus on building a relationship with them. I realize that while the past is important, it doesn't have to dictate how things go with them now. So yeah, thanks again to everyone who helped me see things clearer. I'm feeling a lot more hopeful about this, and I'm really glad I didn't just go with my gut reaction to tell them everything right off the bat. We'll see where things go from here. But I'm cautiously optimistic. Update. I don't know if anyone cares about this, but I just thought I would give a little update before anything. I read a lot of your comments. So many were saying I was selfish for wanting to expose my stepdad, and then so many were saying I was a coward for not. Some people were saying I was allowing the abuser to get away with it by not telling my brothers. I had DMS calling me an abuse apologist. People are calling me a liar for not answering the question. James asked when we first met. I never said I wasn't ever going to talk to them about my past, literally. In my last post, I said I was still working on sharing my past in a healthy way, with help from my therapist. I had people acting like they knew best and that I should just tell them both right away. So many people are arguing about it. One way or the other, it does seem like everything I do. There will have issues. I will upset someone. I know that. And I am trying to navigate this in my own way, so please be respectful of that. Even if you would have done it a different way, I am in no way letting SD get away with the abuse. I tried everything I could as a child teen. To get him prosecuted, I have accepted that that will never happen. Just know I am a real person who reads the comments. Not everything I do is perfect. But please just be kind. I don't say this to stop people from giving me advice. I love advice. Just be positive and kind. I don't need more negativity anyway. In the weeks since my last post, I have met up with my brothers 3 more times, once with both, and 2 times. It has been just me and Richie. There seems to have been an instant bond between us, something that I didn't even know I wanted. I am loving hanging out with them, which is amazing because I didn't even think I ever wanted to see any of my family again. Never mind, start to develop a good relationship with some of them. When I last met up with Richie alone, we went to go see a movie and then get something to eat. We spoke about our plans and what he does now, and we got talking about me and foster care. I asked him what he had been told about me growing up. He said they haven't been told much, but that Mom sometimes talks about me. I asked him what he remembered of me, and why I was taken into care. He said he has some memories, fuzzy memories and clear memories, but he said he didn't know for certain what happened. He said he remembered a lot of fighting and arguing between me and SD. He said he had one very clear memory of me, but said he didn't know whether it was appropriate for him to share it or not. He asked me what I remembered, and I said it was difficult for me to talk about with people. He said he understood if I didn't want to get into it. I asked him what his, clear memory was. He remembered me being about 8 years old. My SD stripping me naked and putting me in a dog's collar and making me eat dog food. He said he remembered his dad hitting me with his belt as I was eating out of the dog bowl and crying. This actually happened many times for me growing up, but he said he only remembered it once I started crying, and he apologized for bringing it up, and I said don't. I was glad he at least remembered some things about my abuse. He said he guessed that the abuse by SD was the reason I was taken away. I said yeah. I asked if SD ever abused either of them, and he said he hadn't ever, but he said he wasn't close to either my mom or his dad. He said they weren't ever amazingly loving people, but never abused them. He said he was sorry again. We spoke some more about our childhood. I felt safer talking about the abuse since he already remembered some of it. We spoke a bit more about it. I tried answering questions he had, and he answered some of mine. He asked if the trauma still impacts me now, and I said yeah. I was open with him that I've attempted to end my own life multiple times because of it. He apologized for not being there for me, for not sticking up for me. I said nothing that happened was his fault or my fault, and that we can't change the past after we finished. We both went to our own homes. He messaged me saying he's glad I grew up and that I managed to keep living. He meant it sweetly, I think. Even though it came off a little weird, I feel really amazing that I have a brother who seems to care about me. I couldn't even have imagined he would have liked me a few weeks ago update. Hey everyone, it's been 16 days since my last update and I wanted to fill you in on how things have been going. I'm still working on building a relationship with my brothers, but it's been more complicated than I anticipated, while things started off surprisingly well. It's clear now that we're all navigating different versions of our shared past after Richie opened up about his memory of the abuse. We've had more conversations about what I went through. I didn't want to keep typing around the subject, so I decided to share a little more, but I've been careful not to overwhelm them. James, though, has been acting a bit distant since then. I can't help but wonder if maybe he's struggling to process everything. I wouldn't blame him. It's a lot to take in, especially for someone who had no idea what was really going on back then. And I didn't even really tell him what happened. Just that I was abused by his dad when I was young. And that's what caused me to go into foster care, and I only told him that much after he asked me again. Richie has been supportive. But I think even he's starting to feel the weight of it all. We had a pretty intense conversation a few days ago where he admitted that he's feeling conflicted. On one hand, he loves his dad, but on the other, he now knows what a monster he was to me. It's like he's torn between two realities. The dad he grew up with, who was far from perfect but never abusive to him, and the man who made my life hell. He hasn't said it directly, but I think part of him feels guilty for not experiencing the same horrors I did. I think he feels like I got it, so he and James didn't. I keep reminding him it's not his fault, but I can tell it's weighing on him. Richie has been hanging out with me like 3 times a week, though, and we have a good time together when we do hang out. As for James, Hun's been pulling away. I tried reaching out to see if he wanted to meet up, but he keeps making excuses. I get it. I probably dropped a lot on him. I've decided to give him some space and not push too hard. I've learned that everyone processes trauma and difficult truths in their own way, and maybe he needs time to wrap his head around everything. Despite all of this, I've started to feel a bit lighter sharing my story. Even if it's just pieces of it has been hard, but it's also been freeing. I spent so many years carrying this alone. And while I'm still cautious about how much I share, I'm beginning to realize that I deserve to be heard too. I'm continuing therapy. And my therapist has been amazing at helping me figure out how to balance opening up with protecting myself. One thing I didn't expect was for my mom to reach out. She sent me a message on Facebook a few days ago saying she wanted to talk about the past and that she misses me. It was the first time in years I've heard from her directly, and honestly, I'm torn about what to do. Part of me is still angry, furious even that she let all of this happen. But another part of me is curious. I don't know if she's finally seeing things clearly or if she just wants to smooth things over without actually addressing what happened. I haven't responded yet, and I'm not sure if I will. It's hard to know if she's changed or if it's just too little too late. For now, I'm focused on my relationship with Richie and James. I'm hopeful that, with time, James will come around and we can all find some peace with the past, but I'm also learning that not everything can be fixed, and that's okay. Some things you just have to learn to live with. Thanks again for all the support. It's been really helpful to read through your comments and know that I'm not alone in this journey. Update. Hey everyone, I wanted to hop on and give a little update first. I wanted to say thank you to everyone who reached out and sent love. I really appreciate all the messages, so I felt really conflicted after my mom asked to meet me up. I really hadn't had much contact with her since I was removed. After really considering it, and after reading the messages I got from you guys, I decided it was probably best to not respond to my mom. I decided not to meet up with her and just ignored her completely, as I think even messaging her would make my mental health spiral. It wasn't long after that James asked if I could meet up with him, which I was happy about because I felt like he had been avoiding me since I revealed everything about what his dad and our mom did to me. Richie couldn't come, even though I invited him. So it was just me and James. We went to the cinema, and we were having a good time when he started talking about our mom and how much she wanted to meet me. I told him I just wasn't ready now, and wasn't sure if I'd ever be ready to meet her again. He started saying how it's selfish of me to not at least talk to her, and I tried to reiterate that I wasn't ready to talk to her and how what she did to me has caused so much pain and damage to me. He started to say something like, she's not the same person anymore or something, But I cut him off. I tried to shut it down there and said I don't want to discuss it further, and if he was going to keep bringing it up, I would just drop him back off at the train station. He called me a DC cad and told me to just drop him off, so I did that. And not long after that, he blocked me on everything, which I admit I was really upset about. Richie called me and told me that James was upset and had been speaking about me being selfish in the house. And Richie said that it was probably best for me and Richie to go low contact for a while. Even though he said he supports me, he said he has to try and navigate it through his home life until he is able to move out and be independent. I understand that, even though it made me really sad that happened about 2 weeks ago. And I haven't heard anything from any of them since then, even though I've been sending memes to Richie on Instagram every other day or so. We had been sending each other memes constantly before, and he hasn't even opened the messages. So, honestly, I don't know where to go from here. I feel pretty disappointed by everything. I don't know if this is the right place to ask for advice, but if anyone does have some advice on what to do. Update. I deleted my last account because I was going into a very dark place, but I have proof that I am the OP. If anyone wants it, it's been about 4 months since I last posted on Reddit. I left things in a really bad place shortly after my last update. I attempted to take my own life. That wasn't the first time, but I truly thought I was past that. I've recovered, and I'm so glad my attempt failed, my God. If anyone reading this has even the slightest thought like that, please speak to someone. You are worth it. The world is better with you in it. I said this somewhere on my last account, but before Richie and James came into my life, I never wanted a family. I never craved it, never needed it. But after they did and then left, all I could think about was how I'd screwed everything up again. I hated myself for it. I tore myself apart over how I ruined everything. But now, in a better place, I can see I did nothing wrong at the time. Though it didn't feel that way. Just over 6 weeks ago, Richie reached out to me again. He said things had settled at home, and he was hoping we could start again. I told him politely, because I really don't blame him, that unless he was ready for a full relationship with me, I couldn't do it. I couldn't live through another breakup. I know that's not the right word, but I just can't think of a better one. I said if he wasn't ready, I wouldn't hold it against him, but I couldn't be put through this again. He told me he was ready, and he promised me that if he had to make a choice, he'd choose me over them. I asked him about finances and how he'd manage, but he said he had it sorted at the time. I didn't realize. But later I found out that Richie and James' paternal grandfather had passed away and left them both a substantial amount of money. So we started again, and it felt like no time had passed between us at all. He told me that I was all anyone spoke about in the house for about 2 weeks after everything fell apart. How I was selfish and mean and evil. How my mom had posted rant after rant about me on Facebook, wondering how she raised such a selfish, evil person. I didn't know, because I haven't checked her Facebook in a while, although I used to obsessively if I had the energy for it. I'd go on and comment something like, "You didn't raise such a selfish, evil person because I was removed into foster care because of the abuse. UNSD put me through Mother of the Year." But honestly, I don't think I could cope with the fallout of it anyway. Richie said he wasn't going to tell his parents about getting back in contact with me. He said he wanted to move out and then go and see with them to support me. I told him I didn't care if he told them or not, or if he cut them off or not. That was his choice. The only thing I needed from him was consistency. Either he was in my life or he wasn't. No more back and forth. Since then, things with Richie have been going really well. Better than I ever expected. Honestly, he's starting to feel like my best friend, which is something I never thought I'd say about a family member. We see each other all the time, and it just feels right. Like I finally have someone who understands me and actually wants to be in my life without conditions. I don't think I realized how much I was missing that until I had it for a while. Richie kept our contact a secret. He hadn't told anyone at home that we were talking again, and I was fine with that. It wasn't about hiding, it was just easier for him. But somehow James found out, and it caused a lot of issues for Richie back at home from what Richie told me. James wasn't happy about it at all. I don't know exactly what was said, but it was enough that Richie decided to speed up his timeline to move out. He was planning on waiting a bit longer, but with all the tension at home, he just wanted out as soon as possible. James still hasn't reached out to me, and honestly, I don't expect him to. I've made my peace with that. I hope that one day he'll be able to see past the loyalty he has for our parents and realize that I'm not the evil person they've made me out to be. But I also know that he might never get there, and that's something I can't control. People believe what they want to believe, and right now he's not ready to see the truth. Maybe he never will be. The good thing is, despite Jam's reaction, no one has actually tried to stop Richie from seeing me. That at least is something. Most importantly, I'm feeling so much better about life again. After everything, I'm finally starting to believe that I deserve to be happy. I don't know what the future holds, but for the first time in a long time, I feel hopeful. Thank you for watching the video. If you are interested in listening to these kinds of stories, we've got more in store for you. Simply subscribe to our channel, hit the like button, and share it with your friends.